It is 12:01 on the dot, so we're going to get started. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Lindsay Shotland, and I'm a registered dietitian at Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center. Today, I am happy to welcome you to the final of 3 lunch and learns that focus on nutrition and fitness topics related to survivorship. This webinar will be recorded, and there will be time for questions after the presentation. I'd like to first say thank you to the EJ and Marjorie B. Orso Family Foundation for sponsoring this series and furthering our mission to improve survivorship and lessen the burden of cancer through avenues such as education. According to the National Cancer Institute, an individual is considered a cancer survivor from the time of diagnosis through the balance of life, including those living with cancer and those free of cancer. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker, Dr. Stephanie Compton. Dr. Compton is a postdoctoral researcher in the Cancer Metabolism Program at Pennington Biomedical Research Center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Dr. Compton's research focuses on how nutrition and exercise can help improve cancer outcomes, with the goal of helping survivors thrive and survive during and after treatment. Some of her current studies include investigating how weight loss after diagnosis with non-small cell lung cancer may change how individuals respond to food and how exercise may help with blood sugar changes due to colon cancer treatment. Dr. Compton received her PhD in human nutrition, foods, and exercise with a focus on cancer metabolism from Virginia Tech and is also a registered dietitian. Welcome, Dr. Compton.
Thank you, Lindsay. And thank you everyone for coming to our Lunch and Learn today. I'm excited to talk to you about exercise and physical activity and eating for an active life before, during, and after cancer treatment. So my goals for this presentation is that by the end of it, you will understand why physical activity is recommended for cancer survivors. You'll be able to recall and hopefully implement the physical activity guidelines, and you'll learn about nutrition guidelines for cancer survivors and what to keep in mind for being active during and after treatment. But first, before we get into the bulk of our presentation, we're going to start off with some questions. So you'll see the question pop up on your screen, and if you can, try to answer that, and then we'll show kind of what everyone responded with at the very end after the question is done. So the first question is, true or false, can exercise help you do your daily activities and help reduce the risk of cancer recurrence? I'll give you a couple of seconds to answer. More than a couple of seconds, but you'll have time to answer. Okay. So 100% said true. The next question, also true or false, the physical activity guidelines recommend at least 500 minutes per week of moderate activity. Okay, y'all are good with this one. Everyone said false. Okay, our next question, which of these is the minimum recommended number of muscle strengthening activities you should do per week? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Okay, we have split 50-50 between 3 and 4. And our last question, to help maintain or regain muscle during or after treatment, what should you make sure to get enough of? Vitamin C, calories, protein, or D, which is both calories and protein. Okay, about 1/3 said protein and about 2/3 said B and C. So we're going to talk over these same questions again at the end of the presentation, and we'll also give you the answers at the end of the presentation. But we're going to cover all of these things so that we kind of talk about all these topics while we're here today. So I wanted to start off kind of talking about the benefits of exercise for the general population, but also for cancer survivors specifically. You might know this already. This is a very, thing that is very helpful for most people for exercise is that it helps prevent disease, helps improve your quality of life, can help you age, in a way that you're still able to maintain your activity levels, helps reduce injury. And again, it also helps with doing our daily activities. So those are things like bringing our groceries in from the grocery store or walking up the stairs or like playing with our friends or family or kids or grandkids, that kind of thing. And while exercise is recommended for everyone, right now about 1 in 4 adults are meeting the activity guidelines. So we have some work to do in this, but there are a lot of benefits to regular exercise. And there are specific benefits for exercise for cancer survivors. So I have a variety of different benefits on this slide, but I wanted to point out a couple of them. Some of them are very similar to what we would use for the normal, like the regular population and the broader population, right? So things like, again, increased ability to do your daily activities, improved quality of life, also things like better sleep and mental health and energy levels. Those are kind of broader impacts of exercise. But for cancer survivors specifically, we also have a reduced risk of cancer recurrence, a reduced risk of developing other diseases after cancer treatment, things like diabetes or cardiovascular disease, improved recovery from treatment, as well as decreased side effects and potentially improved appetite if that's something that is the side effect that you experience during treatment. So overall, there's a lot of different benefits, and we're going to talk about some of these a little bit later as well. But you have the added benefit of having things like reduced cancer recurrence risk, improved recovery from treatment, and decreased side effects from this as well. So again, I said that most people are probably not hitting the physical activity guidelines. So what are they, right? For the physical activity guidelines for everyone, right? We recommend at least 150 minutes per week of moderate aerobic activity or 75 minutes of vigorous aerobic activity, plus at least 2 days per week of muscle strengthening activity. So with the aerobic activity recommendation, the kind of recommendation is at least 150 minutes, going up to maybe 300 minutes, or doing 75 minutes per week of vigorous. And for cancer survivors, these recommendations don't differ. So we also recommend this amount of activity for cancer survivors, though there are some considerations that we'll talk about a little bit later for how you may be able to implement exercise before, during, or after treatment as well. So I want to next kind of talk about the difference between aerobic activities and muscle strengthening activities, and as well as we're going to talk about the different intensities of exercise. So the differences between aerobic and muscle strengthening activities. Aerobic activities are things that get your heart rate up, and they tend to have like a rhythm to them. So if you think about dancing or walking or running or playing a sport, there's like a repeated rhythm to these things. And that is kind of the hallmark of aerobic activities. So they're really improving your cardiovascular function. And so some examples of these, I already said them, are dancing, walking, running, swimming, playing sports or playing with your kids or your grandkids, or doing things that are very rhythmic and have getting your heart rate up, that kind of thing. And then muscle strengthening activities are going to be activities that make your muscles work harder. So these are more weight bearing, and they're going to improve your muscle strength and your muscle mass. So I think a lot of us tend to think about weightlifting, and that's a really good example of muscle strengthening activities. But there are also other examples like doing things like water aerobics or gardening, where you're like lifting, soil or different things in your garden. Yoga and Pilates can be muscle strengthening as well. And then doing some like daily activities at home, right? Like taking the stairs instead of taking an elevator, doing things like pull-ups or push-ups, like body weight exercises as well. So we want to make sure that we're getting both of these things. We don't want to just focus on one or the other. We want to try to get a little bit of both every week to be able to hit the guidelines. And for intensity, there's an easy way to figure out what intensity your exercise is at. So again, the recommendations for aerobic activity is to get either 150 minutes at minimum of moderate aerobic exercise or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise. But the difference between these intensities is that with light exercise, you can talk very easily, you can carry a conversation very easily. These might be things like walking, gardening, yoga, or doing daily activities like carrying your groceries in. Moderate activities are going to be where you can talk in sentences, but it may be a little bit short or choppy conversations because you're breathing harder. So again, these can be things like swimming, if you're swimming very slowly, playing certain sports, water aerobics, or weightlifting. And then vigorous activities, it's going to be difficult speaking in complete sentences. So that might be things like running, dancing, or walking. And you might notice that in all of these categories, I have some similar activities. So walking is one that is in every single one of these. And that really depends on how fast you walk. It depends on your personal like fitness and your history and that kind of thing. And I think we're really going to make the point here that intensity is specific to you. So intensity is going to be related to how hard you're working to do the activity. And that's going to be relative to things like your fitness and your history. Okay. So if you are somebody who is new to exercise, your intensity might be different than somebody who has been exercising regularly. Or once you've been exercising, it might be different than somebody who has not exercised recently. So your moderate activity might be someone else's vigorous activity and vice versa. And this can change, especially with cancer treatment. So if you're somebody who hasn't done a lot of exercise before treatment and you want to kind of start during or after treatment, your intensity might be different than if you had gone and done it before, or it might be different than somebody who was able or who has done activity before, that kind of thing. And so it's very specific to you. And so you want to aim for a combination of light, moderate, and vigorous. You want to be making sure that you're doing regular activity as much as you can. You're not sitting a lot during the day, that more light activity, moving around, and then aiming for moderate and vigorous activity as well. So let's switch gears now and talk about exercise before, during, and after cancer treatment. So like Lindsay mentioned at the beginning, we consider cancer survivorship to start at the point of diagnosis onward. And so I want to talk specifically about kind of the before and during treatment phase, as then we'll talk about the after treatment phase. And I want to talk about some of the benefits that exercise can give you and some of the goals that you should have during these different times. So for exercise before and during cancer treatment, as I mentioned before, exercise may be able to help you handle and recover from treatment more easily. So if you have had surgery, that might help you recover faster if you're able to do some exercise before that surgery, or you're able to maintain your exercise that you were doing before surgery. You may recover more quickly from that, but it also may help you recover more quickly from things like chemotherapy and radiation. So if you maybe you're receiving a chemotherapy that is in cycles, if you're able to kind of keep active during that, you may recover more quickly between cycles or after your cycles are finished. And exercise may also help you have less toxicity symptoms from treatment. So you may be able to tolerate your treatment a little better, and it may help you receive the best dose of chemotherapy. So if you're having less toxicity symptoms, you may be able to then receive the dose of chemotherapy that you're supposed to receive because you're able to tolerate it better. So this has kind of benefits for treatment outcomes as well, and able to give you more of the chemotherapy that you're supposed to receive, but also might help you feel better during that treatment as well and help you recover a little bit quicker between cycles or after your chemotherapy radiation is completed. And for exercise after cancer treatment, this again can help you recover more quickly from treatment. So if you maybe you didn't exercise during treatment, that's totally okay, right? But you want to start exercising after treatment, you can still recover more quickly after you completed your treatment. It can also help reduce the risk of developing other diseases and reduce the risk of cancer recurrence. And if there are any side effects from treatment that impact how you exercise or how you feel during treatment, those will start to decrease over time. And so you may feel better starting exercise after treatment as well. And you can ramp up if that's something that is new to you. So going off of that, I want to talk about what your goals should be during these different cancer stages. So before treatment, if you exercise before you start treatment, you may be able to tolerate more activity when you're getting treatment. So if you were just diagnosed, you can begin exercising and you can start slow and build your way up so that you can potentially tolerate that activity while you're getting treatment as well. And it might help you recover better once you start getting treatment. And then another goal of this should be to maintain your weight and your muscle mass as you're headed into treatment so that you can continue to tolerate and get the amount of treatment that you're supposed to receive. So during treatment, you want to stay as active as you can. I know this is a time a lot of us have various different side effects that can occur from different types of treatment. And so, you may have some weeks that you feel really bad and some weeks where you feel really good, but staying as active as you can, maybe just doing some of your daily activities, keeping up with what you were doing before treatment started, can be a great way to add physical activity into your day. Your main goal here is also to maintain your weight and to maintain your muscle mass, because again, that is going to help you tolerate your treatment better and help you feel and function better during your treatment and also afterward. But if you are new to exercise and you want to begin exercise during treatment, you want to start slower and then at a lower intensity, and you can build up from there. And that's true for everyone if you're new to exercise, but it can be especially true during treatment when you might have side effects that can affect how you feel. And then again, the last thing is to keep in mind your side effects. If you find that you have more side effects at different points in your treatment cycle than others, you may want to kind of plan your exercise around there and just stay as active as you can in the times that you feel maybe not your best, so that during the times that you feel better, you can be a little bit more active. And then after treatment, if you've recently finished treatment, you may need to start slow and build up. If you're new to exercise, you may need to start slow and build up. But your goal kind of here is to maintain or gain muscle mass, especially if you lost weight or you lost muscle mass during treatment. That might be a great thing to focus on when you are kind of in the after treatment phase, because again, that muscle mass is going to help you with how you function. It's going to help with your daily activities. It's going to help you recover more quickly from treatment and everything. So that can be a goal that you have during this time. So some tips I have for getting started with exercise, either before, during, or after cancer treatment. Keep doing your normal activities as much as you can, right? Like, I know that how you feel can be very variable during this time, but keeping up your normal activities will kind of keep you on a routine. It'll keep you doing the things that you normally do, and it'll keep you active, right? So if you normally, go to the grocery store on Sunday and you walk around for an hour, try to do that as much as you can, right? Of course, keeping in mind that you should listen to your body and start slow, especially if you're new to exercise or if you are having a lot of side effects because of treatment and maybe you don't feel up to doing your normal activities. If you're starting exercise or you're wanting to do more of your normal activities, start slow, listen to your body, and build up over time. Okay. And one other thing that I wanted to kind of give you as a tip here is that splitting up your activity may make it easier to build up. I think a lot of us, when we think about starting an exercise routine, we think we have to be like 45 minutes, 4 times a week, and that's a very strict schedule, but we can actually split up our activity across the day and make it a little bit easier. And there's these things called exercise snacks, as we call them, where we do maybe 10 or 15 or 20 minutes of activity multiple times a day rather than doing like one large 45-minute or hour block. Those still count towards your activity, and that's a great way for you to kind of increase your activity and build up over time so that you're able to do more as you do more activity. And then I also wanted to give you some tips for making exercise easier to fit into your daily life. Making exercise part of your routine is a really easy way to do this. So doing things like taking the stairs instead of taking an elevator, parking your car a little bit farther away from the grocery store entrance so you have to walk farther, taking an extra lap around the grocery store when you go in there. Doing those kind of things where it's becoming part of your routine, right? And you can also do this with, I know, getting support from friends and colleagues and coworkers and family, where you make a part of a routine to do things that are specifically exercise. So maybe say you set up a walking group with people in your neighborhood so that every like Monday night or something, you go on a walk or something like that. But it becomes part of a routine so that you're able to kind of focus on it and do it because it is part of something that you are always doing. And that makes it a little bit easier to fit into what you're doing every day. The second tip I have is to focus on the process and not just the end goal, right? We might have an end goal of this of saying, oh, I want to, be able to walk a mile or something like that. But if we just focus on the end goal, that doesn't give us a lot of motivation for the middle part of this. So like the actual process of getting there, which is the majority of what we're actually doing, right? We're spending more of our time focusing and doing the process than we are just doing the end goal. So if you have an end goal, I want you to think about what the process that it will take to get there. So if your goal is to be able to walk around your neighborhood in 15 minutes or to walk a mile or, to walk on the treadmill for an hour or something like that, think about the end goal, but really focus on the process. Like have fun with the process, and that will help you get to the end goal. The third thing, and honestly, probably the most important thing, is to do something that you enjoy, do something you've always wanted to try, do something that you've never done before because it's exciting, but really just have fun with it, right? Exercise is not a way to just like punish ourselves or like to not have a bad time. It's not just a means to an end. It can also be fun. And so if you find something that you really enjoy, it becomes less of a chore, it becomes easier to make part of your routine, and having fun with it is obviously going to be more enjoyable. And then the last thing is to get support from friends, families, coworkers, your care team, depending on, who you have kind of in your circle, getting support from them, kind of telling them, hey, I want to be more active, or I'm working toward this goal, or I want to make sure I'm moving more every day kind of thing. One can help you by getting support from those people, but also you might be able to have people that are, helping you with accountability, or people that are joining you for those activities, right? So if you say that you want to go on a walk after dinner every single day, getting your family in with that can be, motivating, but also really supportive, because then you're getting, time to spend with people that you care about. So those are some of my tips for making exercise a little bit easier to fit into your daily life. And then I want to also give you some things to keep in mind about exercise during and after cancer treatment, because I think one thing that's really important to consider is how you, especially during and directly after treatment, how you may be feeling. And I want to be clear that the type of cancer, the stage of cancer, the treatment type, all of those things can impact how you exercise. So definitely keep in mind the side effects from treatment, whether you have any fatigue or any physical limitations. And also remember that many people feel better if they're more active during treatment. So if you're feeling very fatigued, being more active can help combat that fatigue. And so you may feel better from the side effects if you are able to be more active, but do keep them in mind. Remember to listen to your body. Don't necessarily push yourself if that is not something that you really feel up to doing. Doing things that are more gentle, more daily activity things can be a way to be more active, but also be able to listen to your body. And then the last thing I want to make sure to say is to check in with your care team about your activity if you have questions. So, for certain types of treatment, you may have things that you have questions about or that may be useful to ask your care team about. So, for example, if you're immunocompromised, it may be useful to ask if you should exercise at home or outside rather than at a gym, or if you're having any kind of skin irritation, if you should avoid things like water activities, or if you have bone metastases, whether or not certain types of exercise might be better or worse depending on where those are located. So definitely check in with your care team, especially if you are starting a new exercise routine, because they can help you answer questions, and help support you on that journey as well. Okay, so now I want to switch gears and talk about nutrition for an active life. So we're going to talk a little bit about nutrition guidelines for cancer survivors, and then things to keep in mind for being active during and after treatment when it comes to our nutrition. So nutrition in general can help with cancer treatment, recovery from treatment, and being active, right? So diet can help you feel better during treatment. It can help you if you are having things like fatigue or certain types of side effects. So, for example, I just published a paper where we looked at the effect of diet on chemotherapy induced neuropathy, where it's like pins and needles that are like cold sensitivity in your fingers or your feet or your things like that. And diet actually helps that. So if you had a higher diet quality, you had a lower risk of developing that neuropathy. So it may help reduce certain side effects, and diet can help you recover better as well. When we're thinking about more of that time where we're thinking about long-term survivorship, nutrition can also, just like exercise, help you reduce your risk of other diseases like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and help with reduce your risk of cancer recurrence. And then when it comes to being active during and after treatment, what you eat can help you maintain your weight and your muscle during treatment, or help you gain muscle afterward, which, as we talked about, is really important for how you're feeling and how you're functioning, and help you tolerate your treatment better as well. So let's talk real quick about the general guidelines for cancer prevention and survivorship. So when it comes to nutrition recommendations for cancer survivors, they are very similar to what we would recommend for cancer prevention. So they are not really any different. They are very helpful in both of those stages. So in general, the recommendations for nutrition guidelines are to eat a diet that's rich in whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and beans. To limit foods that are more high in fat, starches, or sugars, so things like fast foods or like processed foods, those kind of things. To reduce or limit your red and processed meat consumption to about 3 times per week or less. If you can swap sugar sweetened beverages like soda or fruit juice for drinks without sugar, like diet sodas or sparkling waters, regular water, that can help reduce your excess sugar consumption. You also want to reduce or limit alcohol. And then the last one is very specific, I think, for cancer prevention and survivorship over, I guess, like general, what we would tell all Americans to do. And that's to not rely on supplements. So that's not relying on supplements for cancer prevention or cancer treatment or cancer survivorship specifically, to focus more so on, I guess, like our whole diet rather than trying to only use supplements to meet our needs, essentially. So, in order to make these a little bit easier and to think about how, okay, if I'm going to implement all these diet changes, like what is the best way and easiest way for me to do this? How you set up your plate can actually help these make hitting these really easy. So, this is the American Institute for Cancer Research's new American plate, as they call it. This is essentially just if you think of a plate, like a plate in front of you at the dinner table, how you would divide up that plate with different types of foods. So they recommend to make the majority of your plate, over 50%, it consists of things like whole grains, vegetables, fruit, and beans. So it doesn't necessarily have to be all of those things at the same time. It can be, for example, if you have breakfast, you might have fruit. If you have lunch, you might have more whole grains and vegetables. Dinner might be beans and whole grains or something like that. But to make the majority of your plate more of those fruits, vegetables, plant foods, and then to make the rest of your plate more lean protein foods. So these can be things like, meats and meat substitutes, so things like chicken or tuna. Beans technically count as a protein and a like vegetable food, so those can be used in this category as well. Or things like meat replacements, sorry, like Beyond Meat or different plant-based options, things like that. You can also use things like dairy, so like Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, milk, those things can fit into that as well. So this is really just general guidelines, but if you think about how you set up your plate, making the majority of it plants and the rest of it having that lean protein foods, can make it a little bit easier to hit this. And especially doing it as often as you can, right? So even if you go out to eat, trying to aim for more of these like vegetable, fruit, whole grain options and lean protein options more often than not can be really helpful. So, how nutrition can support you being more active before, during, and cancer treatment. So, honestly, the guidelines themselves are going to be very helpful for this. So, what you eat most of the time is going to impact how you feel when you're being active. So, you want to focus more so on your whole diet. And I know we talked about supplements when we're talking about things like cancer prevention or cancer treatment, but when we're thinking about like being active, like if you think about when you go to maybe Walmart or something like that, if you go into like more of the workout section of the store, there may be a lot of supplements that are there. Or if you go into the supplement section, there's a whole sports nutrition supplement section. Many people don't need supplements, right? They can be helpful in certain circumstances, but you don't necessarily have to rely on supplements in order to, if you are being active, in order to support that activity. So what's happening most of the time is going to be the most supportive. So focus on your whole diet over just kind of focusing on supplements. And then to help maintain or rebuild your muscle, you want to do two things. You want to eat enough calories and you want to eat enough protein. So protein is going to help you build your muscles, but if you aren't eating enough calories to help like maintain your weight and do everything, you're going to have a hard time getting enough building blocks to be able to build that muscle mass. So if you are eating enough calories and you're eating enough protein and you're pairing it with those muscle strengthening exercises, that's going to help you maintain or rebuild your muscle mass when you are before you start, during your treatment, or after your cancer treatment as well. And then I want to give this really quick tip as well. If you're planning on doing like a longer activity, so for example, say you have a water aerobics class that may last, an hour, or you're going on a hike or a log walk with a friend or a family member, things like that, things that are more than an hour, you may want to have a small carbohydrate-based snack because that's going to help you feel your best during your workout. So I really like things like applesauce or banana because they're really quick and easy to eat. You can also do things like granola bars or cereals. And they aren't necessarily going to be very heavy on your stomach. So if you want to go out and you want to, go on a hike or a long walk, you might take a banana with you or something like that, and that can help you feel really good during your workout and help you prevent you from kind of hitting a wall during your workout and be like, I don't want to do this anymore, and I feel really bad because I haven't fueled this activity. So aiming for a snack before or during a workout, if it's longer than an hour, can be really helpful also. So, some things to keep in mind when you are active before, during, and after cancer treatment. So, this first one is especially true before and during treatment. So, you want to make sure that you're eating enough to maintain your weight. So, depending on what type of treatment you have, what type of cancer you have, you may be prone to losing weight or you may be prone to gaining weight. So, regardless of which kind of direction we're thinking about, we want to make sure we're maintaining our weight that we had before we started treatment. So, if your appetite is low because of treatment, you want to focus on what we call energy dense foods. And I have a little graphic that I have here to kind of demonstrate that. So, energy dense foods are foods that have a lot of calories per amount that the food is, versus nutrient dense foods have less calories per the amount that it is. And the example that I like to give here is yogurt. So if you go for a full fat yogurt, that's going to be more energy dense than if you went for a non-fat yogurt. So even though it's the same amount of yogurt, that full fat yogurt is going to be more energy dense because it's going to have more fat in it than the non-fat yogurt, which was going to be less energy dense. So you're going to get more calories for the amount of food that you're consuming if you have the full fat yogurt. So this is really useful to do if you're feeling like your appetite is low, or if you're feeling like you're not really interested in eating. Doing more of those energy dense foods can be really helpful in that circumstance. And kind of going off of that, side effects can impact how your appetite is. So, and it can also impact how you feel when you eat, right? If you're having things like nausea or vomiting or diarrhea, those side effects can definitely impact your appetite, and that's something to keep in mind. So I recommend talking to a registered dietitian if that is something that you're experiencing and you're looking for different switches that maybe you can make to keep eating enough during treatment, even if you are having side effects. And then the last thing I want to say is don't be afraid to eat your favorite things. So that can really be a big motivator for making sure that you are eating enough, especially if you're being active, right? If you're being active, you're going to be burning more calories, and you already need to be keeping up your weight during treatment. And so don't be afraid to eat your favorite things. That can really be motivating and kind of be, a useful thing to do when you're feeling like maybe your appetite is too low, or maybe you're not feeling like you want to eat. Could you eat something that you really, really enjoy, right? So can you maybe like add in something that you really like to a meal that is going to be able to kind of motivate you to eat that more? So I also want to kind of be clear on this, like how do I know that I'm eating enough, right? So if I know the general guidelines, that's great, but how do I know I'm getting enough calories and enough protein to actually be able to be and like maintain activity before, during, after cancer treatment? So one thing I like to, like an easy way that you can kind of look at this is to keep an eye on your weight. So if your weight is going up or if it's going down, depending on if you're during or after treatment, eating to where you're kind of maintaining your weight within like 5 pounds is a good way to know that you're eating the correct amount. So your energy needs might change during treatment or after treatment. And so if you are seeing bigger changes in your weight, you can kind of adjust from there. So if you're losing weight, for example, you could eat more so that you're going to kind of help maintain that weight. I also want to say, listen to your body. Same thing with exercise. Listen to your body and track how you feel with side effects. So again, if you're going through cycles, just like you would do with exercise, in the times that you feel better, you may feel like exercising more versus the times that you feel worse. It can be the same thing with eating, right? So if there's times which you feel better and you feel like you can eat well during a specific time, that might be a good time to kind of focus on this. And then in the times when you don't feel as well, kind of making switches to address some of the side effects that you may be having during that time can help you continue to eat enough for what you need, especially if you're being active. And then a really quick and dirty way to know if you're eating enough protein is to aim for about 30 grams of protein per meal or 15 grams of protein per snack. So if you have a food that has a nutrition label on it, you can very easily look at that on the nutrition facts label on that. But if you are kind of thinking about, I'm going out to eat or I'm going to a meal at a friend's house, and so I'm not going to have like a barcode or something like that to look at, you can kind of think about the serving of protein that you have, especially if it's something like meat or something like that, as like a deck of cards or the palm of your hand, and that's going to be around a serving of meat or protein. And so aiming for that can be really helpful. And if you aim for that around that amount of protein, you're probably going to be eating enough protein. So kind of aiming for that ballpark can be really useful. And then I want to once again plug that if you are having questions about what you should be eating or what you are eating, or whether you're eating enough during treatment or after treatment, definitely talk to a registered dietitian. There are going to be a lot of variations in people, like between people and what their energy and their protein needs are. There's going to be a lot of variation depending on the type of treatment that you're getting, if you've been losing weight, if you've been gaining weight, if you are during treatment or after treatment. And so I highly recommend asking to speak to a registered dietitian, because that is going to be able to give you more personalized information and kind of help you with having somebody that's you're going to be able to ask questions to. Okay. I want to kind of lastly address two really common questions that I get about nutrition when it comes to especially being active, but also just nutrition during cancer. So the first question that I get often is, should I exercise before breakfast, first thing in the morning? I know there's a lot of talk on the internet and in news articles and things like that of the benefits of fasted exercise. But I want to be clear that when you work out and how you feel that activity is really based on your personal preference. So if you're somebody that doesn't eat breakfast and you want to, maybe go on a walk first thing in the morning or do your exercise first thing in the morning, and you don't normally eat breakfast, you may prefer fasted exercise. But if you're somebody who really likes breakfast, or especially if you're doing something where it's like later in the morning, then you doing it not fasted might be the preferential way to do it. So regardless of your preferences, right? Like I think that's the most important thing to keep in mind. Just think about what you normally like to do and what you feel best at doing. And it might take some trial and error, right? Maybe you try one day of fasted and one day of not, but definitely take into account your personal preference. I will say that if you especially are doing a longer form of activity, again, kind of that hour threshold, if you eat that small carbohydrate-based snack, that is going to help you feel your workout and help you feel better during your activity, because you are, exercising for longer. And I also want to say that there's not necessarily any robust added benefit of doing it fasted unless you prefer it that way. So that is based on personal preference. You don't have to do it fasted if you don't want to. You don't have to do it fed if you don't want to, but go off of what you prefer to do. And then the other question that I get very, very often is, should I avoid carbohydrates if I have cancer or if I have had cancer? And I want to say, no, you don't need to avoid carbs if you have or have had cancer. Your body needs carbs for a variety of functions. Whether you eat those carbs or whether you produce them yourself, you need them for a lot of different things. And I also want to be clear that carb foods, they contain a lot of other nutrients too. So if you think about like whole grains, right, that's a carb food, but it also contains things like fiber and vitamins and minerals. And so you also need those things. And so cutting out a whole food group can create a really restrictive diet, can be hard to follow. It can be, something that you don't enjoy. And so you're also missing out on potential nutrients that those carbohydrate foods can contain as well. For active people, especially, as I've mentioned, you do like a carbohydrate-based snack, that can be a really easy way to fuel or refuel a workout. So that is something that you want to keep in mind as well. But in general, no, you don't have to avoid carbohydrates if you have had cancer. Okay, so now we are at the end of the presentation, and hopefully now you understand why physical activity is recommended. and you can recall the physical activity guidelines, and you've learned a little bit about nutrition guidelines for cancer survivors and what to keep in mind if you're being active during or after treatment. So we're going to pop up our questions again, okay? So our first question, these are the same questions that we had at the very beginning of the presentation, but we're going to ask them again, and I'm going to give you the answer to the question after we pop up the question. So the first one, true or false, exercise can help you with your daily activities and help reduce the risk of cancer recurrence. This one is true. Very good. This one, I think you all got this one completely at the beginning also. But yes, exercise can help you do your daily activities and help reduce the risk of cancer recurrence. Okay, second question, true or false? Physical activity guidelines recommend at least 500 minutes per week of moderate activity. Let's see. Do we have the question up?
It's not letting me launch number 2.
Okay. Well, I think everyone got this one correct at the beginning also. So, so we'll just show the answer to this one. This one is false, right? So the baseline recommendations for this is 150 minutes per week of moderate activity, but going up to around 300, but 500 is kind of overshooting it a little bit. So recommend at least 150 up to 300 minutes per week of moderate aerobic activity. Okay. Can we pop up this question? This is our third question. What's the minimum recommended number of muscle strengthening activities you should do per week? 1, 2, 3, or 4?
It'll pop up.
I don't see it on my end. I don't think. Give us just a second. Maybe we can get it popped up here. If we can't, you can just drop your answer in the chat.
Got some answering 2 answers with 2.
Okay. Perfect. Yes, the answer is 2. So the key for this question was minimum recommended, right? So definitely can do more if you're feeling up to it, but the minimum recommended number of muscle strengthening activities is 2 per week. And then our last question, to help maintain or regain muscle during or after treatment, what should you make sure to get enough of? Vitamin C, calories, protein, or calories and protein? We may just do that in the chat also.
Yep, we've got 2 answering D, B, and C.
Yes, that is correct. Yes, so you want to focus on calories and protein when we're thinking about maintaining or gaining muscle mass during and after treatment. So thank you all for your attention, and hopefully you had a great lunch as well. And if you have any questions, we can take those now. And I do want to also plug Pennington Biomedical Cancer Metabolism Program. We have a lot of ongoing trials in a variety of different populations that are looking at exercise and nutrition during and after cancer treatment. And the one good thing about, or like the one thing that I really enjoy about our programs is that we provide a lot of support and guidance for doing different exercises with those exercise interventions, or doing nutrition with nutrition interventions. And so if that's something that you're interested in, you can scan this QR code here, and that will take you to our website, and you can kind of scroll around, find out more about what we're about here, and also see some of the different trials that we have ongoing. So with that, I will take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Compton. I'll let y'all just put your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A. I'll be checking both. But the first one we have is, what would you recommend to someone who has a physical disability but wants to begin exercising safely?
That's a great question. And I think definitely, going back to listening to your body and doing what you can, finding something that is accommodating of that is going to be, really important. And I think a lot of us might think that I have to do a certain type of exercise for it to count, and that's definitely not the case, right? So if you're somebody that maybe you're, not you're having issues with things like walking or running or something like that, you don't have to do something that is going to hurt you or that is not going to be possible for you. You can do things like water-based activities or rowing or something that is more like upper body based, and that also counts, right? So if you're getting your heart rate up, if you're muscle and using your muscles and things like that, that counts as well. And so doing something that is accommodating of that definitely counts. So accommodate for what you're able to do and what you feel like doing.
Okay, thank you. Who, I guess to follow up, just as you answer that, are there any, I guess, people in the community, professionals that could help these people reach those goals or do exercises safely?
That's a great question. So I think if you kind of like look into a local gym or something like that, you can definitely get recommendations, especially if you need accommodations for certain exercises or for certain types of activities, right? If you are going to maybe like a group fitness class or if you go to a gym, things like that, you can definitely ask the instructor or one of the trainers that works at the gym and they can give you recommendations. I will say for example, for the programs that we have at Pennington Biomedical, where we're doing exercise interventions, we have people who are certified in cancer specific exercise. And so they're able to provide a little bit of more specified guidance. But that is, doing more general, I guess, advice and modifications is definitely something that anybody can do if you're doing like a group class or you're going to the gym, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. And again, y'all can continue to put questions in the chat box or the Q&A. But another one we have is, I know that you said carbohydrates are safe to eat. Does that also include sugar?
That's a great question, right? So in general, right, I guess we don't really recommend we eat a lot of sugar for anyone in general, right? We want to limit our added sugars. All carbohydrates break down to sugar technically. So, anytime you're eating a carbohydrate, you're getting that sugar. And I often get the question of does sugar feed cancer? And I often say that it's kind of oversimplifying cancer a lot when we kind of say that, and that there are a lot of things that we have to consider when we're thinking about that. And if we are to cut out sugar, we're not necessarily going to starve or prevent cancer because we need those carbohydrates. And so while I don't recommend, right, like going out and eating a bunch of added sugar because none of us should be doing that, you don't have to cut out sugar either.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's a big question that I get a lot here too.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, okay, another one,
Mhm.
kind of on the same note. What are your thoughts on artificial or fake sugar?
That's a great question. So as far as we know, right, the research that we've done on artificial sweeteners so far has not linked them to cancer. So we don't have like really robust or even like noticeable relationship between consuming artificial sugars and developing cancer or making our cancer worse or having recurrence or anything like that. Kind of the same thing with regular sugar, right? I'm not going to recommend that you go out and eat like a ton of artificial sugars, right? But they're not harmful. And so if that is something that is going to help you reduce your added sugar intake by consuming more, like for example, like if you're swapping regular soda for diet soda, I think that's a better switch, right? Because you're getting less of that added sugar and you're not getting really any harm from the artificial sugar. But again, like you shouldn't go out and just consume like a bunch of packets of Splenda or something like that, right? So there's a balance for that, but they aren't necessarily bad and it can be helpful for reducing your added sugar intake.
Thank you. Well, those are all the questions we had today. Thank you, Dr. Compton, and thank you everyone for attending this virtual lunch and learn. Again, it was recorded and we will have it on our YouTube channel after.
Thank you.
All right, have a good day, everyone.